I am installing a TFT LCD screen into my Sega Nomad, today on Arctic Lab Services. I bought this screen assembly and mounting bracket on Console 5. It costs around $15, not including shipping. Although it is not the best picture quality option available, it is by far the cheapest. This cheap alternative is still better than the original screen, especially if yours is damaged. I highly recommend doing a cap kit to the Nomad before attempting any screen mod. If you do a screen mod with faulty caps, the mod might not work properly or not at all. With all that said, let's get on with the mod. First, let's prepare the mainboard. Disconnect this wire from both ends. This is for the backlight. We won't need it anymore. If you haven't already, remove these 4 screws. Let's remove the screen. There are posts on each side that need to be lifted out first, then swing the screen away. We need to remove this tape. Use a sharp edge to get it started. I cut the tape, but not the ribbon cable to make it easier. After we get the tape started, just peel it off. Flip it back over to remove the screen. Add a generous amount of no clean flux along the ribbon cable. It's a bit of a pain to see, but I am lifting on the screen while I heat up the solder joints. If your screen is not salvageable like mine, you can cut the cable to make it a lot easier to remove. Now you can see me lifting the ribbon cable as I heat up the solder. A hot air workstation would be ideal for this situation if you want to save the screen. After you remove the ribbon cable, sweep down the solder points to clean and clear any solder bridges. This is the wire harness for the LCD driver board. The red wire is for VCC. The first black wire is ground for VCC. The second black wire is the ground for the composite signal, and the yellow wire is for the composite signal. We don't need the small connector on the other end, so we cut that off. I lost some footage here, but basically I soldered on 3 inches of wire to the VCC and the VCC ground wire, and 6 inches to the composite and composite ground wire. I used heat shrink tubing to protect them from shorting out. The composite signal or yellow wire goes to TP237. The composite ground or black wire goes to the ground tab of the AV out port. We're going to get our power from the switch. The VCC or red wire gets soldered to the bottom right solder point of the power switch. The VCC ground or black wire gets soldered to this point right above C202. It should look like this. I did my composite wires a little too short. It's a stretch, but it still works. If you do 6 inches, it should be plenty. Now let's prepare the screen assembly. This part is optional. I'm going to mod the driver board to use only 5 volts instead of 12 volts. This makes the screen more power efficient and makes batteries last a lot longer. If you don't do this part, you may need to find a different soldering point for the power on the main board. The first thing we need to do is remove this diode here, then run a jumper wire to the top leg of this transistor here. To remove this diode, add plenty of no clean flux and add solder to the iron and float the diode off. Then add new solder to the top leg of the transistor. Cut a jump wire to length, tin and trim both ends. Solder one end to the transistor. Route the wire to the left pad of the diode. Then solder into place. Double check to make sure your solder joints are good and you have no shorts. Let's mount the LCD driver into the bracket. These 3 posts here line up with the 3 holes on the driver board. The board will be held in by these 3 tabs here. Place the board into the bottom tab, then press the posts into the holes. Pull gently on the bracket to get the board into the last 2 tabs. The screen bracket is just friction fitted. Simply insert the screen till it is flush with the bracket. Flipping it over, place the 2 tabs inside the guides and close it up. This will slightly bend the ribbon cable, but that's okay. It's how this bracket was designed. Press on the latching tab to secure the 2 pieces together. And that's the LCD assembly. Let's put it all together. To install the screen assembly, line up this large post and these 2 small posts with the holes on the assembly. Remove the protective film from the screen. Insert the assembly and press down gently to make sure it is seated all the way. Connect the wiring harness to the mainboard. Fit the wires into the wire guide along the side. Flip the mainboard over onto the front shell. Make sure all connectors and wires are out of the way. Don't forget the power switch. With everything seated correctly, screw in these 3 screws and connect these 2 connectors. With the 2 halves next to each other, insert the ribbon cable and close the bail on the ZIF connector. Close up the Nomad and screw in these 5 screws. The bottom center is a game boot screw. With it all back together, insert the battery pack and a game to test it out. And that's it. It looks great considering how cheap this mod is. Thanks for watching.